The transport ship docked at Meridian's gate with a soft thud that Sarah barely noticed. Her heart was beating too fast, her hands trembling despite her attempts to maintain composure. Through the viewport, she could see the massive diplomatic station, spinning slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. Somewhere inside that structure, a human was waiting for her, a human she would be forced to bond with for an entire year. The very thought made her skin crawl. Sarah had seen humans before, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of them. They were the newcomers, the aggressive species that had erupted onto the galactic stage only 2 centuries ago. While her people, the Valaxi, had spent millennia perfecting arts of diplomacy and empathic connection, humans had spent their time perfecting ways to destroy each other. They were violent, primitive. Their lives flickered by in mere decades, barely long enough to learn wisdom. And now the Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, had decided that forced cultural unions were the path to peace. Ambassador Thalwyn, "We have arrived," her attendant said softly. Sarah stood, smoothing down her flowing robes. The fabric shimmered with colors that reflected her emotional state, currently a muddy mixture of fear and resentment. She took a deep breath and tried to clear her mind. As the daughter of one of Valaxi's most prominent diplomats, she had a duty. Her people were watching. She would not shame them, but she did not have to like it. The docking corridor felt endless. With each step, Sarah's dread grew heavier. She had read the file on her assigned human. Lieutenant Kyle Morrison, age 28, Special Forces soldier. The file listed his accomplishments in cold clinical terms: successful missions, combat efficiency ratings, psychological evaluations. Between the lines, she read the truth. He was a killer, a weapon in human form. The Valaxi were empaths. Sarah could sense emotions from other beings, could even glimpse memories if the connection was strong enough. It was a gift that made her people natural diplomats and mediators. But it also meant she would feel everything from this human: his violence, his aggression, his alien mind. The conference room was bright and sterile. Commander Lisa Hayes stood near the window, her human features arranged in what was probably meant to be a welcoming smile. Beside her stood Elder Vintara, one of the Valaxi council members who had pushed hardest for these unions. "Ambassador Thalwyn," Lisa said, stepping forward. "Welcome to Meridian's Gate. We're honored to host this historic union." Sarah inclined her head politely. Her eyes swept the room, looking for him. The human. The soldier. He stood near the far wall, and for a moment Sarah forgot to breathe. Kyle Morrison was not what she expected. She had imagined someone hulking and brutish, with wild eyes and aggressive posture. Instead, she saw a man of average height with dark hair cut very short. He wore a simple uniform, standing with his hands clasped behind his back. His posture was rigid, military, but his face was calm, almost neutral. But when their eyes met, Sarah felt it. The connection snapped into place like a circuit completing, and suddenly she was drowning in him. Memories crashed over her in waves. The thunder of gunfire, screams, blood on his hands, the weight of a rifle, the smell of smoke and burning metal, death, so much death, and underneath it all a current of something else: duty, honor, love for the people he protected, and fear, deep, terrible fear. Sarah gasped and broke the connection, stumbling backward. Her attendant caught her arm. "Are you all right?" Elder Vintara asked with concern. "Fine," Sarah managed, though her voice shook. "Just adjusting." She looked at Kyle again. He had not moved, but something in his expression had changed. Sadness, maybe, or resignation. He knew what she had seen. He knew what she thought of him now. "Perhaps we should begin the ceremony," Lisa suggested gently. The bonding ceremony was brief and formal. Words were spoken in both languages. Documents were signed. Sarah barely heard any of it. She was too aware of Kyle standing beside her, too conscious of the emotional weight rolling off him in waves. Guilt, loneliness, determination. When it was done, they were escorted to their shared quarters. The rooms were large and well-appointed, with separate sleeping areas but common living spaces. Sarah immediately retreated to her room and sealed the door. She spent the first hour crying, something she had not done since childhood. Then she spent another hour meditating, trying to center herself. It did not help much. When she finally emerged, she found Kyle sitting in the common area, reading something on a data pad. He looked up when she entered but did not speak. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing. "I will stay in my quarters as much as possible," Sarah finally said, her voice cold. "We will appear together for required functions. Beyond that, I expect we can maintain separate lives." Kyle studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Whatever makes you comfortable, Ambassador." His voice was deeper than she expected. Calm. There was no anger in it, no resentment at her words. Just acceptance. Somehow, that made it worse. The first week passed in uncomfortable silence. They moved around each other like strangers, which they were. Sarah attended her diplomatic functions. Kyle maintained his training schedule. They ate at different times. They spoke only when absolutely necessary, but Sarah found herself watching him when she thought he would not notice. Every morning, Kyle woke before dawn. She could hear him moving through his exercise routine. Combat drills, she assumed, training to kill more efficiently. But when she finally worked up the courage to watch from her doorway one morning, what she saw confused her. Kyle moved through a series of controlled movements, each one flowing into the next with grace she had not expected. His breathing was steady and measured. There was no aggression in his posture, no violence in his eyes. He looked almost meditative. When he finished, he noticed her watching. Their eyes met across the room. "It's called Kata," he said quietly. "A form of moving meditation. Helps me center myself." Sarah said nothing. She withdrew to her room, but the image stayed with her. The second week brought their first required appearance together. A diplomatic reception where representatives from a dozen species would mingle and discuss trade agreements. Sarah wore her finest robes. Kyle wore his dress uniform, looking uncomfortable in the formal clothing. "Ready?" he asked as they stood outside the reception hall. "No," Sarah admitted. "But I will do my duty." Something flickered across Kyle's face. "Understanding, maybe." "Yeah," he said softly. "Me too." The reception was exactly as tedious as Sarah had expected. Diplomats and officials congratulated them on their union with varying degrees of sincerity. Some seemed genuinely hopeful. Others viewed them as an experiment that would inevitably fail. Sarah smiled and said the right things. Beside her, Kyle did the same. He was surprisingly good at it, she realized. Despite being a soldier, he handled the social dynamics with skill. His responses were thoughtful. His demeanor was respectful without being submissive. Halfway through the evening, a Kragoth diplomat made a pointed comment about humans being too warlike for civilized society. Sarah tensed, expecting Kyle to react with anger. Instead, he simply nodded. "We have a violent history," Kyle said calmly. "We're trying to do better. That's why we're here." The simple honesty of his response disarmed the situation completely. Even the Kragoth diplomat seemed surprised. Later, as they walked back to their quarters, Sarah found herself speaking without planning to. "You handled that well." The comment about violence, Kyle shrugged. He wasn't wrong. Humans have done terrible things. Still do sometimes. Getting defensive won't change that. Only our actions will. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since their bonding. "You do not like violence, it was not a question." Kyle stopped walking. For a long moment he was silent. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I hate it. Every second of it. Every life I've had to take haunts me. But sometimes violence is the only thing standing between innocent people and death. So I do it, because someone has to." Sarah felt the truth of his words resonating through their empathic bond. The weight he carried. "The cost of his choices, I'm sorry," she said softly. "For what you've had to endure." Kyle looked surprised. Then something in his expression softened. "Thank you, that means more than you know." They stood in the corridor, two beings from different worlds, and for the first time, the distance between them felt a little smaller. That night, Sarah lay in her bed and thought about what she had learned. Kyle Morrison was not the monster she had expected. He was complicated, damaged, trying his best in impossible circumstances. Just like her, the realization did not make everything better. She still feared the violence she knew he was capable of, still struggled with the forced nature of their union, still resented the situation they had both been thrust into. But maybe, just maybe, there was more to this human than she had allowed herself to see. In the common area, Kyle sat alone in the dark, staring out at the stars. He thought about Sarah's words, her apology, the first kindness she had shown him since they met. He had seen the fear in her eyes when they first bonded, had felt her revulsion at his memories. He could not blame her. If their positions were reversed, if he had felt the weight of all her people's long history and wisdom, he would probably feel inadequate too. This was going to be a long year. The third week brought a routine that neither of them had planned, but both had fallen into naturally. Kyle still woke before dawn for his training. Sarah still retreated to her quarters to meditate. But now sometimes they would share breakfast together in the common area. The conversations were simple at first. Safe topics, the weather systems on their homeworlds, favorite foods, nothing too personal, nothing too deep. Sarah found herself curious despite her better judgment. She asked about Earth, expecting descriptions of military bases and weapons factories. Instead, Kyle told her about his family's farm in a place called Oregon. He described vast fields of golden wheat swaying in the wind, mountains covered in dark green forests, rivers so clear you could see the stones at the bottom. "It sounds peaceful," Sarah said, surprised. Kyle smiled, a real smile that changed his whole face. "It is, that's what I'm fighting to protect. Not just Earth, but that peace. That simple beauty." Sarah sipped her tea, processing this. "I thought soldiers fought for glory, for conquest." "Some do," Kyle admitted. "But most of us? We fight because someone has to stand between home and the darkness. We fight so others don't have to." The sincerity in his voice made something in Sarah's chest tighten. She had spent so long seeing humans as warlike aggressors. She had never considered that they might be fighting out of love rather than hate. The morning of the attack started like any other. Sarah was in the diplomatic wing, attending a conference on trade routes. Kyle was in the station's training center, running combat drills with other security personnel. The first explosion shook the entire station. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights flashed. Through the windows, Sarah could see fire blooming in one of the docking bays. "Everyone remain calm," Commander Hayes shouted over the chaos. "Move to the emergency shelters in an orderly fashion." But panic had already set in. People were running, pushing, screaming. Sarah found herself swept along in the crowd, trying to maintain her balance. Another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, Sarah could feel the terror of everyone around her. Their fear crashed over her empathic senses like a wave, threatening to drown her. She pressed herself against a wall, trying to shield herself from the emotional onslaught. Then she felt him. Kyle's presence cut through the chaos like a beacon. Calm, focused, moving with purpose. Emergency lighting flickered on, dim and red. Through the crowd, Sarah saw Kyle moving toward them. He was no longer wearing his casual training clothes. He was in full combat gear, a rifle held ready. 2 other soldiers flanked him. This was the Kyle she had feared. The warrior. The killer. "This way," Kyle commanded, his voice carrying authority that made people stop and listen. "Follow me to the nearest shelter. Stay close. Stay quiet." The crowd began to move, following Kyle's lead. Sarah fell in with them, her eyes never leaving his back. He moved like a predator, every sense alert, scanning for threats. They were halfway to the shelter when the attackers appeared. 3 figures in dark armor burst from a side corridor, weapons raised. They opened fire, energy bolts searing through the air. People screamed and dove for cover. Kyle moved faster than Sarah thought possible. He put himself between the attackers and the civilians, returning fire with precise, controlled bursts. 1 attacker went down, then another. The 3rd attacker lobbed something into the crowd. A grenade. Kyle did not hesitate. He sprinted toward it, scooped it up, and threw himself behind a support pillar. The explosion was deafening. Smoke and debris filled the corridor. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought he was dead. Then Kyle emerged from the smoke, bleeding from a cut on his forehead but still standing. "Still ready. Move now," he ordered. They reached the shelter without further incident. Once everyone was inside, Kyle positioned himself at the entrance, weapon ready. His hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. But through their bond, Sarah could feel what it was costing him. The adrenaline, the fear, the desperate need to protect everyone under his care. Hours passed. The sounds of fighting echoed through the station, distant but persistent. Kyle never left his post, never wavered. Sarah approached him quietly. "You're injured." Kyle glanced at her, then back to the corridor. It's nothing. Let me help. She did not wait for permission. She pulled out a medical kit from the shelter's supplies and began cleaning the cut on his forehead. Kyle stood still, letting her work. Up close, Sarah could see the strain in his face, the weight of responsibility. Through their bond, his emotions were a storm barely contained, fear for the people he was protecting, memories of other battles, other times he had failed to save everyone. Guilt. Always guilt. You saved us, Sarah said softly. Not done yet, Kyle replied. Still people out there who need help. You cannot save everyone. Kyle's jaw tightened. Doesn't mean I stopped trying. Sarah finished bandaging his wound. On impulse, she placed her hand against his cheek. The empathic connection deepened, and she felt everything he was feeling. The fear, the determination. The bone-deep exhaustion of a man who had been fighting his whole life. But underneath it all, she felt something else. Hope. A desperate, fragile hope that somehow this time, peace might actually be possible. Thank you, Sarah whispered, for protecting us. For protecting me. Kyle met her eyes, and for a moment the soldier's mask slipped. She saw the man underneath, scared, tired, but unbreakable. Always, he said simply. The attack ended 3 hours later. Station security, with Kyle's help, neutralized the remaining attackers. The terrorist group called themselves the Purity Front, extremists who believed in species segregation. They viewed the cultural unions as an abomination. 12 people died in the attack. 43 were injured. Kyle spent the rest of the day helping with rescue operations. Sarah watched him move from crisis to crisis, always where he was needed most. He pulled survivors from wreckage. He provided first aid to the wounded. He comforted a child who had lost her parents. This was not the mindless violence Sarah had expected. This was something else entirely. That evening, they returned to their quarters. Kyle moved stiffly, new bruises visible on his arms and neck. He said nothing as he headed toward his room. Kyle, Sarah called out. He stopped, turning back to her. I was wrong about you, Sarah said. I saw your capacity for violence and assumed that was all you were. But today I saw the truth. You are violent because you must be, because you care too much not to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Kyle looked at her for a long moment. I'm still the same person whose memories made you afraid. Nothing about that has changed. No, Sarah agreed. But everything about how I see those memories has changed. I understand now. The weight you carry. The price you pay. Something in Kyle's expression cracked. The soldier's mask fell away completely, and Sarah saw raw pain in his eyes. I have nightmares, he said quietly. Every person I've killed. Every friend I've lost. They visit me when I sleep. Sometimes I wake up and I can still smell the smoke, still hear the screams. Sarah crossed the room and stood in front of him. Slowly, carefully, she placed her hand over his heart. The empathic connection flowed between them, but this time she did not recoil. She let herself feel everything. His pain, his guilt, his humanity. You are not a monster, she said firmly. You are a man who has done monstrous things to prevent greater evil. There is a difference. Is there? Kyle asked, his voice breaking. Yes, a monster feels nothing. You feel everything. That is what makes you human. That is what makes you good. Kyle closed his eyes. A single tear traced down his cheek. Sarah reached up and wiped it away. I cannot make the nightmares go away, she said, but perhaps I can help you carry the weight. If you will let me. Kyle opened his eyes, looking at her with wonder. Why would you do that? You didn't ask for any of this. You didn't ask to be bound to someone like me? No, Sarah admitted. I did not ask for this union. I resented it, feared it. But now I am beginning to think that perhaps the universe knew what it was doing. You need someone to remind you of your humanity, and I need someone to show me that strength and gentleness can exist in the same heart. That night, for the first time, Kyle slept without nightmares. Sarah sat in meditation, her empathic senses extended, gently soothing the turbulent waters of his mind. It was exhausting work, but she did not stop. She had made a choice. She would not abandon him to his darkness. In the morning, Kyle found her asleep in her meditation chair, her face peaceful despite her exhaustion. He carefully lifted her and carried her to her bed, covering her with a blanket. He stood there for a moment, looking down at this alien woman who had shown him more kindness in one night than he had felt in years. Something was changing between them. Something neither had planned, something that scared him almost as much as combat. But for the first time since arriving at Meridian's gate, Kyle felt like maybe this impossible situation might actually work. Sarah woke hours later to find hot tea waiting for her, prepared exactly the way she liked it. A note beside it read simply, "Thank you." Ishi smiled and picked up the cup, feeling its warmth seep into her hands. Outside their window, the station crews worked to repair the damage from the attack. New security measures were being implemented. Life was returning to normal. But inside their quarters, something fundamental had shifted. 2. The transport ship descended through clouds the color of cream and honey. Sarah pressed her face against the viewport, watching as the landscape of Earth revealed itself below. Green fields stretched in every direction, broken by clusters of trees and the silver ribbon of a river winding through the valley. "That's it," Kyle said beside her, pointing. "That's home." His voice carried a warmth Sarah had never heard before. In the 6 weeks since the attack, they had grown closer. They talked over breakfast now, shared meals in the evening. Sometimes Kyle would tell her stories of Earth, and Sarah would share tales of Galaxy culture. The walls between them were coming down stone by stone, but this was different. This was his home, his family. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked. Kyle smiled. "A little. My mother's been planning this visit since she heard about the Union. She's probably cooked enough food to feed the entire station." The transport landed in a field near a cluster of buildings. A farmhouse painted white, barns with red roofs, and various outbuildings Sarah could not identify. It looked simple, peaceful, nothing like the military bases she had imagined in Kyle's past. The moment they stepped off the transport, a woman came running from the farmhouse. She had Kyle's dark hair now streaked with gray and his same steady eyes. "Kyle," she shouted, throwing her arms around him. Kyle hugged her back, lifting her off her feet. "Hey, Mom." When he set her down, his mother turned to Sarah. For a moment, Sarah tensed, expecting judgment or fear. Instead, the woman smiled warmly and opened her arms. "You must be Sarah. Welcome to our home, dear." The hug was unexpected but not unwelcome. Sarah felt the woman's emotions through her empathic sense. Joy, relief, genuine happiness, no fear, no resentment. "Thank you for having me," Sarah managed. "Nonsense, this is your home too now," Kyle's mother said. "I'm Clara, by the way. Come on, everyone's waiting inside." The farmhouse interior was warm and lived in. Photographs covered the walls, showing Kyle at various ages. A small boy with a gap-toothed grin, a teenager in a school uniform, a young man in military dress, and everywhere family, people laughing, embracing, celebrating together. Kyle's father, Ben, was a tall man with weathered hands and a gentle voice. His younger sister, Amy, was studying medicine and bombarded Sarah with questions about Galaxy physiology. Their enthusiasm was overwhelming but oddly comforting. Dinner was exactly as Kyle had predicted. Too much food. Clara had prepared dishes from recipes passed down through generations. Roasted chicken, fresh vegetables from their garden, bread that smelled like heaven. Sarah tried everything, delighting Clara with her genuine appreciation. "Kyle never told us how beautiful you are," Amy said during dessert, grinning at her brother. Kyle looked down at his plate, but Sarah caught the slight smile on his face. "He has told me much about all of you," Sarah said. "Your family clearly means everything to him." Ben nodded, his expression growing serious. "We're the reason he fights. The reason he became a soldier. When the border conflict started, Kyle could have stayed here safe. But he said if he didn't stand up, eventually the war would come to us. Better to fight far from home than to wait for the fight to arrive." Sarah looked at Kyle, seeing him anew. She had known he fought to protect others, but now she understood the faces behind that abstract concept. These people, this warm, loving family. "Your son is one of the bravest people I have ever met," Sarah said quietly. Clara reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "So are you, dear. It takes courage to bridge two worlds." That night, Sarah lay in the guest room, listening to the sounds of the farm. Insects singing, wind rustling through trees. In the distance, some animal she could not identify calling out to the night. Through the wall, she could sense Kyle in the next room. His emotions were peaceful in a way she had never felt from him before. He was home, truly home, and the weight he always carried seemed lighter here. The next day, Kyle showed her the farm. They walked through fields where wheat grew tall and golden. He introduced her to the horses in the barn, patient creatures with kind eyes. They sat by the river and watched the water flow past, crystal clear just as he had described. "This is what I think about," Kyle said. "When things get bad, when I'm in the middle of a firefight or making impossible decisions, I think about this place. This peace, it keeps me centered." Sarah understood. She had her own version of this on her homeworld. Gardens where memory crystals grew, preserving the experiences of generations. Places where time seemed to slow and wisdom felt within reach. "Perhaps I could show you my world someday," Sarah said. "If you would like." Kyle turned to her, surprise clear on his face. "You would do that? Take me to your home?" "We are bonded," Sarah said. "Your home is my home. My home should be yours as well." Something shifted in Kyle's expression. An emotion Sarah could not quite name flickered through their bond. Warm, tender, frightening in its intensity. "I would like that," Kyle said softly. "Very much." The third day of their visit brought an unexpected crisis. A massive storm system moved in faster than predicted, bringing high winds and hail. The warning came at midday. They had hours, maybe less, to prepare. The whole family mobilized immediately. Ben and Kyle worked to secure the barn and move the animals to safety. Clara and Amy gathered emergency supplies. Neighbors started arriving, some needing help, others coming to offer it. Sarah found herself swept up in the organized chaos. She helped Clara board up windows, using her Valaxi strength to lift heavy shutters. She carried supplies to the storm cellar. She comforted a neighbor's child who was frightened by the darkening sky. Kyle moved through it all like a conductor leading an orchestra. Calm, efficient, knowing exactly what needed to be done. But this was not combat. This was community. People working together to protect each other. The storm hit with fury. Wind howled around the farmhouse. Hail hammered on the roof like bullets. 20 people crowded into the storm cellar. Neighbors and family pressed together in the dim light. A child started crying. Kyle sat beside her, speaking in a gentle voice Sarah had never heard him use. "It's scary, isn't it?" he said, "all that noise. But you know what? This storm is just nature doing what nature does. It's not angry at us. It's not trying to hurt us. It's just being a storm, and we're safe down here all together." "How do you know?" the little girl asked. "Because your neighbors are here. Your family is here, and we all look out for each other. That's what community means. We're stronger together than any storm could ever be." The girl seemed to consider this. Then she nodded and curled up against her mother, calmer. Sarah watched Kyle in the flickering emergency light. This was yet another side of him. Not the soldier, not the diplomat, just a man who knew how to comfort a frightened child. Through their empathic bond, she felt his emotions. There was no fear for himself, only concern for others, only determination to keep everyone safe. She realized something in that moment, something that both terrified and thrilled her. She was falling in love with him. The storm passed after 3 hours. They emerged to find damage but nothing catastrophic. A barn roof partially torn away, trees down, crops flattened in places. But everyone was safe. The community immediately began cleanup and repairs. People who had nothing helped people who had lost something. Food was shared. Tools were loaned. Kyle worked alongside his father and neighbors, rebuilding what the storm had destroyed. Sarah worked too, using her diplomatic training to coordinate efforts, her empathic sense to find people who were struggling emotionally, her strength to help with physical labor. By sunset, the worst was handled. People were heading home, tired but united by their shared experience. "You were amazing today," Kyle said as they walked back to the farmhouse. "So were you," Sarah replied. "You led everyone without even seeming to try." "That's not leading," Kyle said. "That's just being part of something bigger than yourself. That's community." They stopped walking, standing together in the field as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I understand now," Sarah said quietly, "why you fight. It is not abstract duty or political necessity. You fight for this. For these people. For this way of life where neighbors help neighbors and community matters more than individual glory." Kyle nodded. "My people aren't perfect. We've done terrible things. But at our core, this is who we are. We survive by taking care of each other. By standing together against whatever comes." Sarah reached out and took his hand. It was rough with calluses marked by years of hard use, but it was warm and steady. My people believe that wisdom comes with age, Sarah said, that our long lives give us perspective humans lack. But I am beginning to think we have been wrong. You humans burn bright and fast. You live so intensely because you know your time is limited. There is wisdom in that too. Kyle squeezed her hand gently. Your people have given the galaxy centuries of peace through diplomacy. Mine have given it maybe a few decades of protection through force. Different approaches. Both needed. Perhaps that is why the unions were created, Sarah said. Not to make one species more like the other, but to learn from each other. To become stronger together? Maybe, Kyle agreed. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. Sarah, I need to tell you something. These past weeks getting to know you, He paused, searching for words. I've started to care. The Valaxi homeworld was nothing like Earth. Where Earth was green and blue, Thalaran was silver and violet. The plants here grew in spiraling patterns, their leaves capturing light in ways that made them shimmer. The architecture was grown rather than built, living structures shaped over decades into graceful towers that swayed gently in the wind. Kyle stood at the viewport of the transport, watching the planet grow larger. Beside him, Sarah radiated nervous energy. They will not understand, she said quietly. My people pride themselves on logic and patience. Falling in love with a human after only 3 months will seem irrational to them. Kyle took her hand. Then we'll face their judgment together. The transport landed in a courtyard surrounded by pearl-white buildings. A delegation waited, led by a tall Valaxi male whose robes indicated high status. His face was similar to Sarah's, with the same elegant bone structure. Father, Sarah said, bowing respectfully. Her father, Ambassador Thalwyn, did not return the gesture immediately. His eyes moved to Kyle, assessing him with an intensity that made Kyle want to stand at attention. So this is the human soldier, her father said, the one who has captured my daughter's attention so completely. Father, please, Sarah began. I would speak with him alone, her father interrupted. If you would permit, daughter. Sarah looked at Kyle with concern, but he nodded slightly. This was always going to happen. Better to face it now. They walked through gardens where memory crystals grew like trees, their surfaces holding stored experiences. Kyle felt utterly out of place here, a creature of violence in a world of wisdom. My daughter tells me you are not what she expected, her father said, that you are more than just a warrior. I'm trying to be, Kyle replied honestly. Every day. Why did you become a soldier, Kyle Morrison? The question was direct. Kyle appreciated that. Because someone had to, he said. Because I had the ability and the training, and I couldn't stand by while others suffered. Because sometimes the only thing standing between innocent people and death is someone willing to fight. Her father stopped walking. And the lives you have taken? Do they not haunt you? Every single one, Kyle said quietly. Every face. Every name when I knew it. I don't sleep well, Ambassador. I probably never will. But that's the price I pay for protecting the people I love, including my daughter, especially your daughter. They stood in silence for a long moment. Around them, the gardens hummed with the stored memories of generations. Kyle felt small here, insignificant against the weight of Valaxi history. I had hoped Sarah would bond with someone of wisdom, her father finally said, someone who could match her intellect and grace. Instead, she is bonded with a human whose life will be over in what we consider an eye blink. The words stung, but Kyle could not argue with them. You're right. I'll be dead long before she reaches middle age by your standards. I can't give her the long partnership your people value. All I can give her is everything I am for whatever time I have. Her father turned to look at him directly. And you believe that is enough? No, Kyle admitted. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's all I have to offer, and I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of her. Something shifted in her father's expression. Not quite approval, but perhaps a grudging respect. You are honest, at least. That is more than I expected. He paused. My daughter's happiness matters more to me than tradition. If you are what makes her happy, then I will not stand in your way. But know this, human. If you hurt her, if you fail her, there is nowhere in this galaxy you can hide from me. Understood, sir. Her father almost smiled. Come, let us return. Sarah is probably worried I have frightened you away. Sarah had indeed been worried. Relief washed over her face when she saw them return together. That evening, she showed Kyle the wonders of her world. The memory gardens were unlike anything Kyle had ever experienced. Sarah touched a crystal and suddenly Kyle could feel the memory stored within it, of a Laxi child's first steps. The emotion was pure and powerful, unfiltered by time. We preserve our most important experiences, Sarah explained, so that wisdom is never truly lost. Each generation learns from those who came before. It's beautiful, Kyle said, and it was. But it also made him acutely aware of the difference between their peoples. Humans recorded history in books and databases. The Valaxi lived their history, felt it as immediate as yesterday. They walked through the city as twilight fell. The buildings began to glow softly, bioluminescence painting everything in gentle light. Other Valaxi stopped to stare at them. Some faces showed curiosity, others showed disapproval. They judge you, Kyle observed. They judge us both, Sarah corrected. They see me as reckless. They see you as a corrupting influence. Maybe they're right. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. Do you regret this, us? Never, Kyle said immediately. But I worry about what you're giving up for me. You're standing with your people, their respect. I am gaining something far more valuable, Sarah said firmly. I am gaining you. I am gaining the chance to build something new. Something neither of our peoples has tried before. She took his hand right there in the middle of the street where everyone could see. It was a statement, a declaration. Kyle squeezed her hand gently. Then let's show them it can work. The next day brought news from Meridian's Gate. The Purity Front had not been destroyed. They were regrouping, planning something bigger. Station security was requesting additional military support. Kyle received orders to return immediately. He was being recalled to active duty. They stood in their guest quarters, the weight of the news settling between them. How long? Sarah asked, unknown. Could be weeks. Could be months. I should return with you. You have obligations here, Kyle said. Your diplomatic work is important. So is this, Sarah said, gesturing between them. So are you. Kyle pulled her into his arms. I'll come back. I promise. Do not make promises you cannot keep. Then I promise this, Kyle said, pulling back to look into her eyes. I will fight with everything I have to come back to you. I will be as careful as I can be, and I will think of you every single day. Sarah touched his face, her empathic sense flowing between them. She felt his determination, his love, his fear that he might not actually be able to keep his promise. Then I promise you this, she said. I will work for peace with everything in my power. I will use my position to try to end this conflict, and I will be waiting when you return. They held each other as the twin suns of Thalaran set beyond the window, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The transport left the next morning. Sarah stood with her father, watching it rise into the sky until it was just a speck against the clouds. You love him, her father said. It was not a question. I do, Sarah replied. Even knowing the pain that comes with loving someone who lives so briefly, Sarah thought about Kyle's words about burning bright and fast, about living intensely because time is limited. Especially because of that, she said. Every moment with him is precious because I know we do not have forever. Is that not a gift in its own way? Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. You have grown wise, my daughter. Perhaps this human has been good for you after all. On the transport, Kyle sat in the military hold with other soldiers being recalled to duty. They talked about the mission ahead, about the Purity Front's threats, about strategy and tactics. But Kyle's mind was elsewhere. He thought about Sarah standing in her garden, about the warmth of her touch, about the life they were trying to build together against impossible odds. A soldier named Grant sat down beside him. That your Valaxi partner I saw at the landing pad? Yeah, Kyle said. You actually care about her, huh? It's not just for show? Kyle looked at him. I love her, more than I thought possible. Grant nodded slowly. Must be tough, knowing you've got something good waiting but having to walk into danger anyway. It's always been tough, Kyle said. But now I've got a reason to be careful. A reason to come home. Then you better stay sharp out there, Grant said. Be ashamed to survive this long just to get stupid now. Kyle smiled grimly. Yeah, it would. The transport docked at Meridian's Gate 2 days later. The station bore new scars from the previous attack, repairs still ongoing in several sections. Commander Hayes briefed them immediately. The Purity Front was planning a major assault. They had acquired military-grade weapons from somewhere, probably through black market channels. Intelligence suggested they were targeting the Cultural Union program itself, planning to assassinate as many bonded pairs as possible. They want to prove the unions don't work, Hayes explained. They want to reignite the war between humans and Valaxi. Then we stop them, Kyle said. The problem is we don't know when or where they'll strike, Hayes said. We've increased security everywhere, but we're spread thin. Kyle studied the tactical display. His mind, trained by years of combat experience, began analyzing patterns. Threat assessments. Likely targets, they'll go for the symbol, he said. The most visible union. The one that represents the program's success. Hayes looked at him. You think they'll come after you and Sarah? We're the poster couple for this whole thing, Kyle said. If they take us out, they make their point. Then we use you as bait, Hayes said slowly. Set a trap. No, said another voice. They turned to see Sarah standing in the doorway. She must have taken the attack came on a Tuesday morning during a cultural exhibition in the station's main gallery. Sarah was giving a presentation on Valaxi art forms to a mixed audience of humans, Valaxi and other species. Kyle stood near the back of the room, seemingly relaxed but actually scanning every face, every entrance, every potential threat. Security was heavy but subtle. Hayes had positioned teams throughout the area. Cameras covered every angle. They were as ready as they could be. The first explosion came from the service corridor. Not close enough to harm anyone in the gallery, but perfectly placed to cut off the main escape route. Alarms blared. People screamed and started running. The second explosion sealed another exit. The trap was not for the Purity Front. It was for them. Kyle moved immediately, grabbing Sarah and pulling her behind a display case. Stay low, he commanded. Around them, security teams mobilized. But then the gunfire started. It came from within the crowd. The Purity Front had planted operatives among the attendees. Kyle drew his sidearm, his training taking over. 3 hostiles visible. No, 4, probably more. They were trying to create chaos to separate the targets from protection. Kyle, Sarah said urgently. She was using her empathic sense, reaching out. There are civilians trapped near the east entrance, children. Kyle's jaw tightened. The tactical choice was clear. Protect Sarah at all cost. That was the mission, but there were children trapped and terrified. He met Sarah's eyes. She nodded. She knew what he was going to do. Stay with Grant, Kyle told the soldier who had moved to protect them. Keep her safe. Kyle, wait, Sarah called, but he was already moving. Kyle ran toward the east entrance, weapon ready. He took down one hostile who was firing into the crowd, then another. The smoke was thick, making it hard to see. Emergency lighting cast everything in red. He found them huddled behind an overturned table. 5 children and 2 adults frozen in terror. One child was bleeding from shrapnel. I'm here to help, Kyle said, keeping his voice calm. We're getting out of here. He applied quick field dressing to the injured child while scanning for threats. The path back to the secure zone was blocked. They would have to go through the service corridors. Follow me. Stay close. Stay quiet. He led them through the maintenance passages, moving quickly but carefully. Behind them, the sounds of battle continued. Ahead, who knew what waited? They rounded a corner and came face to face with 3 Purity Front members. For a split second, everyone froze, then Kyle moved. He put himself between the attackers and the civilians, firing with precision. 2 went down. The third got a shot off that caught Kyle in the shoulder, spinning him around. Pain exploded through his body, but training overrode it. Kyle stayed on his feet, stayed fighting. He took down the third attacker just as Grant and another security officer arrived. Get them to safety, Kyle gasped, gesturing to the civilians. You're hit, Grant said. I'm functional. Move. They got the civilians to a secure shelter. Medical personnel immediately swarmed Kyle, but he pushed them away. Sarah, where's Sarah? Sir, you need treatment. Where is she? Kyle shouted. Hayes appeared, her face grim. We lost contact with her team 3 minutes ago. Last known position was the gallery's upper level. Kyle was moving before she finished speaking. His shoulder screamed in protest, blood soaking his uniform. He did not care. He found Grant unconscious near a stairwell, a nasty head wound but alive. The trail led up deeper into the damaged section of the station. Kyle's tactical mind worked through the pain. They had taken her. The Purity Front had taken Sarah. This was their plan all along. Take the symbol. Execute her publicly. Prove that humans and Valaxi could never coexist. He followed the trail of disturbed debris and blood drops. His blood probably from his wounded shoulder, but he kept moving. The station's damaged section was a maze of twisted metal and broken systems. Emergency power flickered. Kyle moved through it like a ghost, every sense on high alert. He heard voices ahead, found a vantage point, and looked down into what had been an observation deck. Sarah was there, hands bound, surrounded by 6 Purity Front members. They had set up recording equipment. This was going to be broadcast. The leader was giving some kind of speech about species purity and the corruption of the Union program. Kyle did not listen to the words. He was counting weapons, assessing positions, calculating odds. 6-1. He was wounded and running on adrenaline. The tactical situation was terrible. He attacked anyway. Kyle dropped into the room like death from above. His first shot took out the recording equipment. His second and third dropped 2 hostiles before they could react. Then he was among them, too close for them to shoot without hitting each other. It was not pretty. It was not heroic. It was brutal, efficient violence, the kind Kyle hated, the kind he was terrifyingly good at. When it was over, he stood among the bodies, breathing hard, his shoulder wound, bleeding freely. The leader was still alive, crawling toward a weapon. Kyle put his boot on the man's hand. Don't. He looked at Sarah. She was staring at him with wide eyes, having witnessed the full extent of what he was capable of. The warrior, the killer, the monster he tried so hard to keep locked away. Are you hurt? Kyle asked, his voice rough. Sarah shook her head slowly. Kyle holstered his weapon and moved to untie her. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting him hard. Kyle, your shoulder, Sarah said. It's fine, he lied. The room was starting to spin. No, it is not fine, Sarah said firmly. She caught him as his legs gave out. Through their empathic bond, she felt everything. The pain, the exhaustion, the fear he had felt that he might lose her, the guilt already eating at him for the violence he had just committed. I'm sorry, Kyle whispered. I'm sorry you had to see that. See what I really am, Sarah held him tighter. You saved me. You saved those children. You did what had to be done, and I'm a monster. No, Sarah said fiercely. You are mine, and I am not letting you go. Security teams found them minutes later. Kyle was rushed to medical. The wound was serious but not fatal. He had lost a lot of blood and would need surgery. Sarah refused to leave his side. You should rest, the doctor said to her. You've been through trauma. I rest when he rests, Sarah replied. In the medical bay with Kyle unconscious from sedation, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel everything. The terror of being captured, the helplessness of being used as bait, the awe and horror of watching Kyle fight, but underneath it all, one truth rang clear. She loved him. Even knowing the full extent of his capacity for violence, she loved him. Maybe because she now understood that his violence was not who he was, but what he did to protect those he loved. Kyle woke hours later to find Sarah asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand holding his. He watched her for a long moment, his heart aching. He had tried so hard to be more than just a soldier for her. But in the end, that was exactly what had saved her. The skills he hated, the training that haunted him, the capacity for violence that made him feel less than human. Maybe that was okay. Maybe he did not have to be ashamed of what he could do, as long as he used it for the right reasons. Sarah stirred and opened her eyes. You're awake. Yeah, Kyle said. How long? 6 hours. They repaired the damage. You will recover fully. Kyle nodded. Then quietly, I understand if you want to end this. The Union, us, after what you saw. Sarah looked at him like he had lost his mind. End it? Why would I end it? Because you saw what I'm capable of. The real me. I saw you risk your life to save children, Sarah said. I saw you come for me when any sane person would have waited for backup. I saw you do terrible things for the right reasons. That is who you are, Kyle Morrison. A good man who does hard things. And I love you for it. Kyle felt something break open in his chest. I love you too. So much it scares me. Then be scared with me, Sarah said, climbing onto the bed to curl up beside him. We will be scared together. We will face everything together. They lay there in the medical bay, holding each other. Outside, the station was dealing with the aftermath. The Purity Front's leadership had been captured. Their plot had failed. The Union program would continue, but none of that mattered right now. Right now there was just two people who had found each other against all odds and were refusing to let go. Days later, as Kyle recovered, the full scope of what had happened became clear. The attack had been coordinated across multiple stations, but Meridian's Gate was the only place where the plot had been stopped before it could escalate into mass casualties. Kyle and Sarah were being called heroes. Their story was spreading across both human and Galaxy space. Public opinion was shifting. More people were supporting the unions. Peace talks that had been stalled were resuming. "We have become symbols," Sarah said, watching the news broadcasts. "I never wanted to be a symbol," Kyle replied. "I just wanted to keep you safe. You did. And in doing so, you may have helped bring our peoples closer to real peace." Kyle looked at her. "You think it's possible? Real lasting peace?" "I think if we can make this work," Sarah said, gesturing between them, "then anything is possible. We are proof that even the widest gulf can be bridged with effort and love." Kyle pulled her close. "Then let's keep being proof. Let's show everyone that this can work." "Together," Sarah agreed. "Always together." Outside their window, Meridian's Gate continued its slow rotation. Ships came and went, carrying people from 100 different worlds. 5 years had passed since the attack on Meridian's Gate. 5 years that had transformed not just Kyle and Sarah, but the relationship between their entire species. The ceremony hall on Unity Station was filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. Unity Station itself was a testament to cooperation, built jointly by human and Galaxy engineers, incorporating the best of both species' technology and design philosophy. Sarah stood before the assembly, her robes flowing with colors that reflected her emotions. Confidence, hope, joy. Beside her, Kyle wore the formal uniform of the Diplomatic Corps. He had retired from active combat duty 3 years ago, though he still served as a military liaison and trainer. 5 years ago, Sarah began, her voice carrying through the hall. "I stood on Meridian's Gate and feared a union with a human. I thought our peoples were too different, that the gulf between us was too wide to cross." She turned to look at Kyle and her voice softened. "I was wrong. Not about the differences. Those are real. But about whether they mattered. This human, this soldier I once feared, transformed everything, not by changing who he was, but by showing me who we could become together." Kyle took her hand and together they faced the assembly. "The Cultural Union program was controversial," Kyle said. "Many saw it as a forced experiment, an attempt to paper over real differences and conflicts. And yes, it was forced at first. Sarah and I did not choose each other. We were assigned to each other." He squeezed her hand gently, but somewhere along the way assignment became choice. Duty became love, and two strangers became partners in every sense of the word. They had been invited to speak at the dedication of Unity Station's Cultural Center, but this was more than just a speech. This was a celebration of how far they had all come. After the ceremony, they walked through the station's main concourse. It was busy with activity, human children playing with Galaxy younglings, mixed species families shopping together, couples of all combinations walking hand in hand. What had once been controversial was now becoming normal. "It still amazes me sometimes," Kyle said. "How much has changed?" "The peace treaty helped," Sarah replied, "as did removing the corrupt officials who were profiting from the conflict. The investigation that Sarah and Kyle had helped trigger had exposed a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone had imagined. Military contractors, political extremists, and corrupt officials from both species had been working to maintain tension because war was profitable. Once exposed, the evidence had been damning. Trials were still ongoing, but the major players were already imprisoned. Without their influence, genuine peace talks had finally succeeded. The treaty was important, Kyle agreed. But I think what really mattered was people seeing that it could work. Seeing us and others like us building lives together. They reached their destination, a school that served children from multiple species. They did this once a week now, visiting schools to talk about the union program and answer questions. The children gathered around them with the easy acceptance that only kids seemed to have. They did not care about species differences. They just saw two people who loved each other. "How did you know you loved him?" a young Galaxy girl asked Sarah. Sarah smiled. "I knew when I realized that I would rather face any danger with him than be safe without him. When his happiness became as important to me as my own." Did you ever want to give up? A human boy asked Kyle. Many times, Kyle admitted, especially at the beginning when everything was hard and we did not understand each other. But giving up would have meant losing something precious, so we kept trying. That is what love is, really. Choosing to keep trying even when it is difficult. After the school visit, they returned to their residence. They had moved off Meridian's Gate 2 years ago, taking up residence on Unity Station permanently. Their home was a blend of both their cultures. Galaxy living architecture merged with human comfort and practicality. Clara and Ben visited often, having taken a surprising liking to space station life. Sarah's father came less frequently, but when he did, he and Kyle had developed an unexpected friendship based on their mutual devotion to Sarah and love of strategy games. In their living room, the walls displayed holographic images. Kyle with his family on the farm, Sarah in the memory gardens of her home world. Their wedding, which had been held in both human and Galaxy traditions. And newer images, the two of them with the children they had taken into their home. 4 children. 2 human orphans from the war, 2 Galaxy younglings whose parents had died in Purity Front attacks, 4 kids who needed a family, and 2 adults who had love to give. Maya has a recital tomorrow, Sarah said, checking the schedule. Maya was the older Galaxy child, talented in harmonic arts. And Danny has his first soccer game, Kyle added. Danny was the youngest, a human boy with endless energy and Kyle's same stubborn determination. Our life has become beautifully chaotic, Sarah observed. Kyle laughed. Yeah, never thought I would be a father to 4 kids from 2 species, but I would not trade it for anything. That evening, with the children asleep, Kyle and Sarah sat together on their balcony overlooking the station's central garden. It was their ritual, this quiet time together after the chaos of the day. Do you ever regret it? Kyle asked. Bonding with me? You gave up so much. Your position in Galaxy society, the long life you could have shared with someone of your own species. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. I gave up one future for a different one. Yes, you will not live as long as a Galaxy partner would have. Your life is short by my people's standards, but it is so very bright. Every moment with you matters more because I know our time is limited. She took his hand. Besides, we are working to change that. It was true. Galaxy medical researchers had been studying human aging, looking for ways to extend human lifespans, not to make them Galaxy, but to give them more time, more years to spend with the partners they loved. The research was promising. Early treatments suggested they could potentially double human lifespan. Maybe more. It would not make Kyle immortal, but it might give them decades more together. Even if the treatments work, Kyle said, I will still age and die long before you. Yes, Sarah agreed. And that will be the hardest thing I ever endure. But Kyle, loving you has taught me that quality matters more than quantity. I would rather have 50 years with you than 500 with someone I did not love. Kyle pulled her close. You know, when I was deployed in combat, I used to wonder what I was fighting for. What made all the sacrifice worth it? Now I know. It was for this. For the chance to build a life with you. For peace between our peoples. For those 4 kids sleeping inside who will grow up in a galaxy where human and Galaxy cooperation is normal. You are getting philosophical in your old age, Sarah teased. I'm 33. That's not old. By human standards, perhaps. By mine, you are still practically a child. They laughed together, comfortable in their differences rather than divided by them. The comm chimed. Commander Hayes' face appeared on the screen. She looked excited. Sorry to interrupt your evening, Hayes said, but I thought you would want to know. The Galactic Council just voted to expand the Cultural Union program. They are opening it to 10 more species pairs, and they are making it completely voluntary this time. Sarah and Kyle exchanged a look. When they had started, they were one of only 5 bonded pairs, all of them forced. Now there were hundreds of voluntary unions across dozens of species combinations, and it was about to expand even more. That is wonderful news, Sarah said. It's because of you two, Hayes said. You proved it could work. You became the example everyone needed. After Hayes signed off, Kyle shook his head in wonder. We just wanted to survive the year. Now we are changing galactic policy. We were just living our lives, Sarah corrected, being honest about our struggles and our love. That is what people responded to. Not perfection, but genuine effort. They sat together as the station's artificial night fell, lights dimming to simulate evening. Around them, Unity Station hummed with life. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds all living together, working together, building a future together. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still prejudice, still people on both sides who believed the species should remain separate. But progress was being made. One relationship at a time, one family at a time, one generation at a time. Do you think Danny will understand? Kyle asked suddenly. When he is older? About where he came from? About the war that orphaned him? We will tell him the truth, Sarah said. That terrible things happened. That his birth parents died in violence, but that something good came from the tragedy. He gained us. He gained siblings. He gained a family that spans worlds. And Maya? Kyle asked. Will your people accept that we are raising her in human ways as well as Valaxi? She will be stronger for knowing both cultures, Sarah said confidently. Just as our human children will be stronger for learning Valaxi wisdom. They will be bridges, Kyle, all 4 of them, living proof that the future does not have to repeat the past. Inside the residence, they heard a small voice calling out, "A nightmare." Kyle went to comfort Danny, while Sarah checked on Maya. The other 2 children, Alex and Trina, slept peacefully. Later, with all the children settled again, Kyle and Sarah returned to bed. They held each other in the darkness, 2 beings from different,